what I see and a lot of the consultancy outputs are saying this, 85, 90% of implementations are not driving value. And I think the biggest reason for that is it's become a buzzword, as a lot of new technologies do.
Yeah.
And I think there's tremendous value, but I think people are getting the kind of shiny object syndrome. To me, it's really, your business problems are your business problems.
That's
That doesn't change, and you shouldn't be thinking about your business problems differently just because AI exists. It's not about where can I insert AI, it's about where can I completely rethink something. The thing that has always existed is that people want authenticity in the people that they follow. Now, it's not that you can't use AI to tidy up your messaging, to portray it in a particular way. But I think what's happened now is the access of AI has leveled out the playing field far higher for everyone else now. So
yeah.
anyone can say, can you type me a tweet about X topic? And you look like an expert, right?
Yeah.
So the reality is, how do you weave in your very specific experiences that can't be faked?
Welcome everyone to another episode of Yollab Central. Today I have with me Parik. So Parik, would you like to tell our audience why they should be excited about this conversation today?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Aditya, for having me. So I think a couple of interesting things about my journey. So I spent just over the last 10 years working with some of the largest organizations in the world. I've delivered large check transformation. So I've had the luxury of working with IBM, with PwC, Capgemini. I've also done a lot of work with lots of different clients in lots of different industries and sectors.
Mhm.
And I guess personally, I've always been very much interested in technology and entrepreneurship. I've dabbled in lots of different things. I've been fortunate enough to see, coming from the world where we've been using floppy disks all the way now to where AI is the hot topic, right? So I've done lots of different things, currently building a business right now. So I'm hoping I can relay some of my journey, some of my experiences, and hopefully we can go from there. And there's a few short bites that people can really grab onto and get some value.
Now, let's talk about the first thing that you mentioned. I mean, the one thing that you mentioned that's currently the hot topic right now, AI, right? What's your experience been in the last few years? Have you been working even before it became burning news, breaking news, or were you there even in the field even before that?
Yeah, see, so I'm similar to a lot of people in some respects in terms of really bringing AI into my life. So look, the topic of AI has been around for decades, quite
Yeah,
literally. But I think AI has only really taken off in the marketplace since ChatGPT basically came to life, right?
that's
So
right.
from my perspective, if you look at organizations like Facebook and social media platforms, they've been using AI and algorithms for however long they've been around for. So as a technology, it's not different. What I think has changed on the playing field is that technologies like ChatGPT, now there's so many different platforms. It's democratized the ability for people to access these technologies. So it's almost as if it's the next evolution of Google, right?
Mhm.
Before you could ask a query and you could find lots of different links and resources.
Yeah.
This is the next level of that, right? And you can implement it pretty much across your entire workflow, personally and professionally. So yeah, I mean, from prompt engineering perspective, I have a quite a technical background, but for me, I kind of think about prompt engineering as my interface of using the AI. Yeah, I use it pretty much in every part of my life. So yeah.
Mhm. Now, there's two things that I want to talk about. I mean, not just two, it's just one basically. Because there was a time when people used to put their whole question into the Google search bar and then look for some question that was similar to what they looked for, right? But now Google
Hmm,
Gemini is actually answering that exact question for them by scrolling through the whole internet, right? And
of
giving them
course.
an AI generated answer. Now, from there, we've come to prompt engineering where we are trying to work out uh, things that we wanted to do with something on the internet, but the AI can do it for us as it is. So writing that exact prompt, right, which we can basically call prompt engineering. Now, are there any basics that people need to know, or it's just logic and people have to be very clear as to what they want AI to do?
So I think
Starting with
obviously
the
first thing
basics,
is,
just not going into the technicals, but we'll get there if required.
yeah, of course. So I think the first thing is obviously this is very much about generative AI. When people use AI, it's such an umbrella term, it can mean a
Yeah.
number of things, but I think in the context of this, we're talking about
Yes.
generative AI.
Yes. Right, right, right.
So for me, it always has to anchor on what is the outcome that you're trying to drive towards. See, is this something that you're trying to learn? So, for example, if it's a topic you don't really have any experience in, sometimes actually keeping it fairly generalized is actually going to be to your benefit because you want it to tell you things that you don't know.
Okay.
Whereas if it's something you want to work harder on, if it's something you want more information on, you're looking for trends, you're looking for forecasting, you're looking to supplement the knowledge you already have, this is where being a bit more bespoke and a bit more comprehensive with your prompt comes into play. So for me, I think the key thing is, each of these individual models and websites have their own best practices, right? There's
Mhm.
substructures, there's ways to think about this. I think there's a couple of simple things.
Mhm.
Firstly, I think just to enhance your prompt is just think about it of how you'd speak to a person. So let's just say, as a very rough example, I want some help with budgeting. I would just think about this. How would I speak to someone who's good with finance and money, right? I think people think AI has a lot of context, which it doesn't until you give it that. I think the other thing is people are thinking about AI as this massive technology that you have to know so much about. It's very conversational, and I think that's the exact power of it. So a simple context could be is telling it you're a financial advisor. You're a professional in helping with budget analysis, for example. Then you can choose to upload bank statements. Perhaps you want to give it some numbers based on what you've previously done. And I think it's about layering on the detail depending on the outcome you're trying to get to. See, if I'm trying to do some form of planning, I typically give it a fairly broad context because maybe it's thinking about things that I just wouldn't think about, and maybe that inspires me to some ideas. However, if I have a very niche outcome that I'm looking for, I want exactly these 10 lines as an outcome, I need to answer this question, that's obviously where being more specific is there. And I think it comes down to your level of comfort in that particular topic area, but also, again, what is the follow-up? Is this a simple one-line question, or is this something where I'm trying to build a strategy document? Am I trying to do some forecasting or trend analysis? So I think the first thing is just think about it. How would you converse with a person who's a professional in the area you're trying to converse with, right? And I think that's a great starting point. Use the reference materials online. There's certain ways to prompt. There's a best practice. Include the role. What's the output you want? What's the tone and the style? And
Yeah.
then after that, it's just about practice, right? I think there is no perfect answer. You speak to 10 different people, they're all going to give you a different way
Yeah.
to do it. But to me, is practice will help you figure out what works for you and ultimately the outcomes you're trying to get to.
All right. Now, the next thing is we talked about generative AI, right? Now, there's a lot of organizations that are trying to bring in AI into their own systems and build it in, either try to build it in-house or bring in somebody who's already built it and then integrate the whole
Mm.
system. Now, what are the major problems that you're seeing organizations facing? Because if there's somebody who's trying to build it for themselves in their organization, what are the main problems that they should be looking at that somebody else is
So
already?
I think a lot of the trends and issues that I see with AI is a lot of what I saw when cloud became one of the big things back in the late
Yeah,
2000s. See, it's a technology. It's obviously huge at the marketplace. Lots of stocks are
yeah,
going up and down, but the reality is it's just a technology.
yeah.
And it's always going to anchor on what is the problem that you're trying to solve. The reason I think that is the absolute most important thing is, see, you can put AI anywhere, right? The question is always going to be, is it adding value and are you getting ROI from a business standpoint? See, when cloud first came along, everyone heard it's scalable and it's great, so everyone wanted cloud. And then what did they realize? It's actually more expensive. I have to refactor
Yes.
things. I think the best thing about AI is to think about it slightly differently, right? One is employee empowerment. How do you get people more productive in their current workspace? If you're a coder, you can use something like GitHub Copilot. You can use Claude Code. If you're someone who's creating processes and operational material, can you draft me an SOP? Can you help me refine my email? Can you abstract detail? Can you add it? So that's kind of the user piece. And I think a lot of the technologies that you can purchase as a common consumer are more than applicable for that. See, the internal piece is far more important when you think about the decisions you're going to make.
Right.
If you think about use cases, you can come up with thousands. In fact, I've worked with teams and organizations that have, literally come up with thousands of spreadsheets of conversations, of ideas, sorry. So then
Yeah.
the question is, firstly, what is the problem you're solving?
Hmm.
Then, is AI actually the right technology to do it? And
Yeah.
then the third one is actually, what is your ROI to actually do this?
Hmm.
Because when you think about AI, it's not just an API or the model of the hosting, it's the ongoing operational impact. How quickly can I remediate issues? Can I keep things updated? What is the risk to my organization by doing this? And what I see, and a lot of the consultancy outputs are saying this, 85, 90% of implementations are not driving value. And I think the biggest reason for that is it's become a buzzword, as a lot of new technologies do.
Yeah.
And, I think there's tremendous value, but I think people are getting the kind of shiny object syndrome. To me, it's really, Your business problems are your business problems.
That's
That doesn't change, and you shouldn't be thinking about your business problems differently just because AI exists. It's not about where can I insert AI, it's about where can I completely rethink something.
Mhm.
Um, One of the big things that I'm always a proponent of is if you have an end-to-end process, so let's say it's about HR and you're thinking about onboarding and recruitment. What you don't want to do is think about it in individual silos. So, for example, if onboarding is part of your HR process,
Yeah.
if you think about HR more holistically, your use case for AI actually grows massively, right? Because instead of trying to automate one part of the process, you can maybe automate 80% of the whole process.
Right.
And so I think it's really being able to take a step back. What are your non-negotiables? Things like what has financial impact? What has impact to end user customers? Security and regulation is another big one, right?
Yeah.
There are certain things that have to exist and have to happen, and maybe you can't remove them out the workflow. But
Mhm.
then everything else very much has the potential to be automated, but you do need to be able to take a step back and figure out, okay, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? What is the result I'm trying to get? And is it actually feasible or worthwhile? Is this a problem I solve with more people? Is it AI? Maybe it's something else, right?
Yeah.
So it's really just thinking about what are you trying to achieve with this, thinking more holistically, and then you can go from there. I think it's just that. I think what having absolute clarity on why you're using AI.
Now, on that note, like that companies hanging on and latching on to that tech buzzword. Uh, I don't know if you've heard that there was this news that an auto company onboarded, I think, Chat GPT, an advanced version of Chat GPT, onto their website in place of their chatbot. And some people actually figured it out that this is Chat GPT itself. And then they started using, because they were using a premium version on their own
Mm,
website, and then regular users just moved from the ChatGPT website onto that automaker's website just to break that thing and use it. So it was just something that came and it struck my mind. So I thought if you
mm.
remember it, probably if you had some context.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially in the earlier days, I think companies, especially the larger companies, are getting a bit more savvier. But
Yeah,
this is where the whole idea of like responsible AI comes into
yeah,
place, right? So it's not just about what it can do, it's what happens if it falls in the hands of a bad actor. Now,
mhm.
in that use case, maybe, you're potentially paying for more consumption, but potentially there's nothing too bad happening. You
Uh-huh.
do see results where people have not necessarily put in the guardrails. They're asking questions where maybe they're forming a contract with this AI that is actually enforceable. You
Uh-huh.
see examples where lawyers are using this to draft proposals and it's making up cases, right? So
Yeah.
it's really important to understand, firstly, what do you not want people to do? And then how do you also enforce that? So there's actually the pro and the con. And AI is probably the first time that technology is moving faster than the people that can use it. So I think it's always going to be one of those things now where regulations and privacy and data and all of that kind of good stuff are really going to have a hard time doing this. I think there's an immense amount of value. But as you mentioned in those kind of examples, right, you can see some probably not so great examples of how AI can be used as well, especially if in the wrong hands.
Yeah, that's right. Now, let's talk about how you are using AI in your daily use. Are there any specific things that you specifically only delegate to AI in
So
your?
my mindset is pretty much why not AI in pretty much everything, right?
Okay.
And so I use it personally and professionally. So I have a bit of a background as a life coach.
Mhm.
So I'm a big proponent in, we have lots of different areas of our life, talk it finance, career, business, health, etc.
Mhm.
In each of those different areas, depending on your personal priorities, there is absolutely a use case for a chat GPT or a Claude starting today. So a great one would be, I'm thinking about going to the gym. You're a personal trainer. Can you give me a plan based on my availability, based on my age, based on my personal professional goals? That's a very easy one a lot of people can do.
Okay.
Another one could be, let's say you're looking for a job. I want help refining my CV. What can you help me do some research on what are the top jobs? So in every area of life, the idea is not whether or not I can use AI, it's just figuring out what is the use case for it. Professionally, I use it whether it's going to help me draft documentation, whether it's going to be simplifying the messaging. Maybe I need to say the same thing in two different ways to two different audiences. I speak to technical people, I speak to business folks. So it's ensuring that you think about AI first because you can put it pretty much anywhere. So I would say the limitation is usually the individual rather than the technology, especially in this case, right? I can learn astrophysics today and I can use it to draft an email tomorrow. So really the world is yours with AI at the moment.
Okay. Now, since this is also a part of my conversation, are you using it somewhere? Have you ever tried using it for social media?
So, funnily enough, yes. So, at the moment, I'm actually in the process of launching a business, and it's around investment intelligence.
Okay.
So, as someone who's spent, the last 5 or 10 years, dabbling with stocks and crypto and all that kind of good stuff, one of the things you learn to realize with stock trading, it's two things. One is there is a lot of psychology involved. And
Hmm.
then the second piece is there is so much data, right? Whether it's going to be earnings reports and annual data reports, what are the macroeconomic trends? What's happening in the news? What's the technical analysis? I mean, it's just an abundance of things that you probably think you need to do.
Yes.
So for our business, what we're trying to do is making it accessible for someone who just isn't the expert or doesn't have the time. So if, for example, I want to know, should I put my money into Apple or Microsoft? A
Oh,
lot of people just blindly say, yes, I trust this company. It's got a large market cap. Now,
yeah.
the reality is sometimes there's economic downtrends. There's times when technology is going to suffer for whatever reason. And so what I'm trying to do is enable people to use AI to bring lots of different data sets together to be able to give them a more holistic outcome in terms of what it's for.
Okay.
Now, as most people will tell you, when you launch a business, you obviously need marketing. So for me, what I'm trying to do is actually articulate and portray my founder's journey. So I'm someone who prefers text-based social media. I'm not so much the Instagram and the Facebooks. So I'm using Threads quite a lot. I'm using X quite a lot. So the way I use AI is I'll come up with a rough story or a plot that I'm trying to say, this is my lesson learned, or this is something that I realized as a new founder that I don't know exist. I can be quite scrappy with my notes and the way I want to articulate this. I can even use the voice mode, so I don't have to think too much. And I can just give it the prompt and say, look, this is the message I'm trying to have. These are the platforms I want it. Can you make this into something that will help me give my messaging to an audience of hundreds, if not thousands? How do I go viral? What are the key things I should include or exclude? And with that, it just makes me simply typing, for 2 minutes into a thing that I can post onto social media, and it becomes far easier and quicker for me.
Right. Now, since you mentioned this, right, you are giving AI a very specific personal touch by giving it your own perspective and then telling it to
Correct.
write according to that. Now,
Correct.
currently, LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram, I don't know what's the situation on X and Threads, but there's a lot of bombardment of AI generated content, be it written
Mm,
or videos. Right, the kind of content I'm talking about,
of course.
specifically
Yep,
LinkedIn.
yep.
So, what do you have to say to that?
So I think you're always going to get the people who are going to try and abuse that technology because at the volume you can create material. So I know for a fact on YouTube, for example, you can monetize on YouTube. So people are creating an exponential number of videos and they're actually making money. I believe YouTube's now changing some of its framework so AI material doesn't generate revenue.
Yeah,
See, I think the thing that has always existed is that people want authenticity in the people that they follow. Now, it's not that you can't use AI to tidy up your messaging to portray in a particular way, but I think what's happened now is the access of AI has leveled out the playing field far higher for everyone else now. So
yeah,
anyone can say, "Can you type me a tweet about X topic?" And you look like an expert, right?
yeah,
So the reality is, how do you weave in your very specific experiences that can't be faked? So for me, there is only one person with my experience with what I've gone through, the emotions I've gone through, the trials and tribulations, right? You can't fake those things in your way that you articulate your story. And more importantly, when people have the conversation, it's very easy to realize if someone's actually lying or not. So
yeah,
to me, it's about AI becomes a way to get leverage, but it's not the way that it replaces my authentic voice. And I would always say to anyone, whether you're trying to promote a brand or yourself, is what is the thing that is uniquely you, not what is the thing that sounds great but is actually fairly generic. Because that's the problem now. All this content is very generic, right? Every week on LinkedIn, I see AI is going to take over all your jobs, then I see it's not going to take over any jobs, right? So that's all generic content. People get the gist of it and they just sign out of it. What you want to do is, okay, what's your unique perspective? What's your unique use case? How are you finding it? And people actually latch onto that because end of the day, we're all human, right? And it's that emotional connection that I think is going to be the key differentiator between someone who leverages it correctly and someone who doesn't.
that's what a lot of people are also feeling. Because whenever you see content, you know that this is not original, it's generic, and
Correct.
you feel more aghast by how can such a person be putting out such content. I mean, you feel that somebody is a I don't know, a specific specialist, and then you see that type of content and you just feel like, why is this person even trying to do so much? Now, So what is the next thing that you are excited about in this whole scenario? What are you looking forward to?
Um, so I think there's a couple of things with AI. One is I think similar to the dot-com boom, what you're seeing right now is an abundance of businesses and use cases and people using it, right? At some point or another, I think there's going to be a huge bubble around the way people are using it, and it's actually going to cause a bit of a reset in the market. I'm excited for that for two reasons. One, I think the opportunity landscape when you see that reset is huge. So either you introduce a new idea, a new business concept when there is a downfall, or if you can weather the storm. So, if you take a company like Amazon, for example, when the dot-com boom happened, they absolutely thrived because they had something that the marketplace wanted. Right now, you see a lot of small businesses, especially just throwing the word AI in because they're trying to get sales on the SaaS platform.
Yeah.
So to me, the opportunity of true value definition is going to be something that's very exciting. And then purely from a technology standpoint, look, I am the I do have the shiny object syndrome. I absolutely love technology for the sake of it. I'm very excited to see where it goes. As of right now, when ChatGPT came over, the reason it was so big was because people are amazed at what it could do. You know, pretty much any topic you could think of, create me a story, tell me a meal plan, anything that you could do. It's like having an expert in your pocket. Now we know that technology is just going to get exponentially better, right? So it's the thought process. So what happens when it gets more intelligent than Einstein? What happens when you truly embed it into your workflows? You think about things like
Yeah.
Siri. What's the next version of that? Embedding it into your phones. Maybe you start thinking about augmented reality and talking to the world around you. That's the kind of thing where I think you're almost going to see like the next iPhone moment.
Hmm.
And that to me is like, where is the next level? How do we stop hallucinations? How does it become more accurate? And I think finally is when it starts actually thinking and inventing for itself. So one of the big domains I think is actually a really good test for AI is around science. So if you
Uh-huh.
think about science, it's about coming through up with a hypothesis and proving or disproving, but it's more about the ideation. To me, when AI starts coming up with its own hypothesis to say, hey, X could be true, and then being able to experiment on that, I
Uh-huh.
think that's truly the time you'll see a significant shift. And, whether it's diseases, whether it's physics, I think you're going to see explosions in all of these amazing places.
Now, since now this question just came up, right? And if you could just keep it short on this one. Now,
Yeah.
we had another AI like tech moment a couple of, I mean, almost 5, 10 years ago with blockchain and cryptocurrency, right? Now, I don't know where it went, whether if that bubble still exists or if it already burst. But right, there was a lot of hype around the fact that blockchain can be implemented into supply chains and in so many processes, and cryptocurrency is the new big thing. NFCs came and vanished within a year. So
Yeah.
what, I mean, obviously AI and cryptocurrencies and blockchains are totally different, but what differentiates these two from
So I think it's going to be around the use cases.
yeah.
See, I think AI is a great generalist and therefore applies in most places. You
Yes.
can use LLMs for general things, you can use SLMs. See, with blockchain, I am a big believer in actually the blockchain technology. I think there is definitely a reason for traceability in contracts and
True,
things of that
absolutely.
nature. The thing is, that's just not applicable to the average person, right?
Yeah.
And to actually incorporate a lot of the blockchain technology, you need like institutional pull to be able to implement these things. I mean, the likes of me and you can start up a business tomorrow, right? So I think just the accessibility and the usability is very different, but I think they both have their use cases. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Now, before we close, Parik, where can people get in touch with you? What more can they know about you?
Okay, so the one thing I'll say is I'm building auravision.io. This is the investment intelligence platform I said. You can find me on Twitter and Threads, as I mentioned. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. So, I don't necessarily post much on LinkedIn, but I'm very much following the news, a lot of the AI jargon that's on LinkedIn, I try and ignore. But I'm very much active following what are the trends, what are people up to. But yeah, Aura Edge, that's where I'm spending most of my time, and I'm hoping I can democratize investing for everyone.
Thank you so much, Parik. It was a great conversation. We started with technology, did crypto in between. We talked AI. Talked a lot of AI and a lot of prompt engineering. So thank you so much for joining in. Thanks for joining me on this conversation. For the audience who's been watching and listening intently, if you liked what we talked about, do leave a like. The comment section is open for perspectives, questions, and suggestions. And don't forget to subscribe before you close the window itself. Thank you so much for joining in. Parik, thank you so much for joining once again.
Thank
and
you, Aditya.
conversation. Thank you so much.